money that they had and say, hey, it's going to take a little bit way more money than this. And so he's thinking in human terms. He's not thinking about Christ just did all these miracles and, he changed water into wine and healed the blind man and healed the man at the pool. Remember the man at the pool, the chapter before, at the age of 38 years, and then the woman that was, with the issue of blood. Now, Jesus doing all these miracles, and still not Peter, but Philip answers in this way. So Jesus knew exactly what he was doing when he was testing Philip. He's trying to get them to also understand, don't just look at the physicalities of every day, because you do have a Christ right here. You do have God in the midst of you. And so, but he's very gentle. I love the way Jesus deals with his disciples. He don't be sarcastic with them and try to belittle them and put them down. He really deals with them in a gentle way, but at the same time, he knows their weaknesses and he challenges them. And so that's what he's doing right here. And in the 8th verse, it says, another of his disciples, Andrew, that's Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. So, but how far will they go among so many? So they answer some, to the human mind, they answer some reasonable questions, but what's really in their heart is they looking at, Jesus, it's a bunch of people here, are you seriously considering, how are we going to feed these people, And so perhaps they thinking, well, maybe we need to, try something different. Like, don't worry about feeding them. Let's just teach them some more stuff, and then just let's get out of here. I don't know. That was just thinking of some things. And so, because they thinking that this got to be impossible. Like, you can't be thinking what we, you can't be, it got to be some other thing. The reason why you're asking these questions, but they didn't get it. So Jesus said in the 10th verse, have the people sit down. Look how calm Jesus did with everything. He said, have the people sit down, And it said there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men was there, of course, along with their wives and daughters. So the thing I'm thinking about here is, John, he's very specific to add that in the area, because it knows, they just came through a desert, so it's a lot of dust and, who knows, probably mud and all of this type of stuff. Now they come to a nice grassy area, and so Jesus is very strategic in where he wanted to carry this out. And also, it was a Jewish custom that right before feast, the head man, or normally the father of the house, if it's a household, or if it's in the synagogue, it would be the priest. He would head the people into prayer and give thanks for the feast, and the people would sit down before they eat. That was just a customary thing for the Jews to do. So Jesus is following the custom, but also he used a nice area to do so. He didn't just have them sit down in the dirt and the sand, That would have been unpleasant, and then you're trying to eat, So Jesus had them sit down. There's plenty of grass in that place. And in the 11th verse, it said, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those that were seated, as much as they wanted. So Jesus didn't just give them here, as much as they wanted. So that just shows that Jesus satisfies your needs. But at the same time, in the 12th verse, let's see, am I in the 12th verse? Yes. Wait, no. Let's skip the verse. Okay, yeah, the 11th verse. Jesus then took the loaves and gave thanks and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. Okay. And he did, there was something else I was trying to say about that, but I lost the thought. So what I was going to say, okay, the 11th verse, it says, Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. Now that's the earthly Jesus. You know, he in the earthly things, he feed us what we need. But in heavenly things, he give us as much as we would according to our faith. And we'll see that as we go on. You know, it's as much as your faith, that's what you receive. So that means that's just the grace side of God. The 12th verse, when they had all, wait, I'm seeing it wrong. When they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. And is that nice, you know, about Christ? You know, Christ is also showing that he not a wasteful, you know, type of person. He's teaching us not to be wasteful here, I believe, because he just performed a miracle to where he took a little bit, handful of goods, and which that's what I meant to point out too about the barley loaves. That wasn't it wasn't a good type of bread. It was just to the bare minimum. It was just something to get by. You know, people would take barley bread. You know, it was quick to make, easy to make. It was pretty. The ingredients was real cheap, and so a lot of times they would make that when they traveling long distance just to get them by until they get somewhere. And so it was kind of like, and so small fish, that's what the other writers of the Gospels, like Matthew, Mark, that's what they point out with small fish. And so they didn't have much in their hands, but Jesus took that little and he multiplied to where it was more than enough. So God has an infinite supply of the things that we need, and yet here he still is careful not to be wasteful. Isn't that something? You know, so, okay, in the 13th verse, it says, so they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign, Jesus performed the sign. After they saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who was to come into the world. So it seemed like they getting it. But then Jesus, knowing that they had intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew to a mountain by himself. You know, Jesus got out of there because he knew what was going on. You know. And so I have much to say about that, but I want to move on because there's some more parts that I really want to get to in this particular passage. So here we go. The 16th verse. Read that to, I think, the 22nd.
When evening came, the disciples at the 16th, right?
Yeah.
Okay. 16 said, when evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, it is I, don't be afraid. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading.
Okay, so let me take this part. Okay, so now notice, now the evening comes, that means it's night, and they went down to the lake where they got into the boat and set off across the lake to Capernaum. Now Jesus, he seemed to really love Capernaum, and I'm thinking because he was well accepted in Capernaum. Galilee area. And Capernaum also provided a lot of resources for them because it was a bigger city, and it was a trade city. You know, a lot of central trade went on in their area, and so Capernaum was a lot of traffic. And I guess also he probably was looking at he could reach more people because it was it was a city. You know, it was in the countryside, and so he tended to go back to Capernaum quite often. And so now he's back in Capernaum. And wait, I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let me just read and make sure. When the evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into the boat and set across the lake for Capernaum. Okay, so they head into Capernaum. By now it was dark. And see, this is what I like about the writers, because they are very careful to add detail so you can know the point they're trying to get across to you. And so that's why I try to follow the scriptures when I speak, because the authors know what they was trying to point out, and I like to try to point out as much as I can gather from the details that they give me. And so here we go. By now, it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. So let's try to picture that. You got the disciples. They already been working all day, really, because they've been ministering, helping Jesus, and, you know, a lot of traveling, and they're doing this by foot and, you know, in the boat, and now they back, and so they come back to the boat, and they getting ready to travel, but the main character is not there, Jesus. Where is the master? Where is Jesus? And Jesus tend to do that a lot. You know, he kind of go off somewhere, and I'm just trying to see it from the disciples' standpoint, because I like to feel the story. And so imagine you're, you know, a part of the crowd or a part of the disciples, and you know what can happen, and because it's times when they get into some trouble and they need Jesus, right? And so they looking around, it's like, where is Jesus? You know, he's the leader, and then on top of that, it done got dark, and it's not like the city. You know, they have street lights and stuff like that. It's dark out there. It's, you know, it's pitch dark. If you ever been to the country, and I'm talking about the deep, deep country, where there's no street lights or anything like that, and no houses around, you'll see that, man, when it gets dark, it really gets dark. And so what verse is that? Because my screen changed. Was that, okay, the 16th verse. Okay, and so now a strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. That's the 18th verse, my bad. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. Now, you have several fishermen in the crowd. That's Peter and his brothers. They was fishermen by trade. They left everything to follow Christ. Now, I point that out because they was familiar with these waters, and they would know before a storm would come, because the last thing they want to do is get trapped out there in those waters when a storm is coming, especially this particular storm. This is a pretty dangerous storm. And so Jesus knows what he is going to do, because he's going to perform another sign to show them who he really is. But they don't know this. So they know a storm is coming. They know what it looks like. They know the temperature drop. You know, they know, hey, we got to get across, because we got 12 miles, because it was about 12 miles across to where they was headed. And they got a row. They ain't got an engine on the boat. You know, this is not modern times, you know. So they got to roll across as fast as they can, you know. And the storm getting ready to come, and here goes Jesus that disappeared somewhere, you know. So can you imagine the frustration, especially Peter? You know, Peter seemed like he was one of them hotheads, you know. There goes Jesus, where is he, you know? Right. He was just pacing back and forth, like, what happened to him? Like, here we go again. Like, we got to get out of here.
He always dipping out.